Hey everyone, Zach from Paramount Financial here. Hopefully you're doing well today. For those of you just joining us, I posed the question, $30,000, $57,900, and $148,575. Which would you rather have? Now, I know it's kind of a no-brainer, $148,575. But the answer is not quite that simple. It depends on the risk that you actually want to take. So what I want to do today is I want to show you the difference between setting your money inside the bank, actually investing your money in what we call fixed income or bonds, and then investing your money into equities or stocks. So investing into a bank, that's the $30,000 that I mentioned. So you take $30,000 and you put it inside the bank, you're going to be looking at, say, a 0.1 to a 1% interest rate. So over time, that's not going to make you a lot of money. In fact, we would call that safely losing money. And what safely losing money actually means is if inflation or the cost of everything around you, think of that gallon of milk, if all of that's actually increasing by 4% every year, 3 to 4%, and you're only making, say, a maximum of 1%, you're actually losing money every year because your money's not able to buy as much in the future. So then we have what is called fixed income investing. And think of fixed income investing like investing with a buddy who you're giving a loan. So think about a buddy coming up to you and asking you for a $50,000 loan to invest in his business. That's essentially what fixed income is. So think about Company A. Company A comes to you and says, listen, we need $1,000 to go ahead and do this project, whatever that project is. It might be building a building, it might be paying some of their employees, it might be investing into their research and development, but you give them $1,000, okay? So what you say is, okay, in order for me to give you this $1,000, I need a 6% rate of return. So I need to make some money on that. So you give them $1,000, they're going to give you a 6% rate of return, or $60 per year is what they're going to be giving you. Now, that might be for, say, 30 years, is that original time that I was coming up with. So 30 years, you're going to give them $1,000, and every single year they're going to give you $60 or 6%. And then what happens is they use that money to, say, put into their building that they're building, or whatever else they're using that $1,000 for. So then at the end of 30 years, they're going to then return that $1,000 to you. So that's the idea of how fixed income works, is you're giving them a loan. Now, there are some pros and cons to actually giving a loan or taking some type of a bond out. So first off, when it comes to loaning money, you're going to have typically a lower rate of return. So you might get anywhere between 3 to 6% for the money that you're actually loaning to them. So if inflation is 3 to 4%, you might keep pace with it. You might even slightly beat it. But for some people, that might be a lower rate of return, and they might actually want some more money on top of that. So you may not keep pace with inflation. And the risk there, again, is that next year your money's not going to be able to buy as much depending on the type of fixed income that you have. And then there are different types of risk that we call interest rate risk and credit risk. So everyone today is actually feeling what interest rate risk is. So interest rates over the last couple of years have soared compared to what we're used to. We saw mortgages for houses. I think my mortgage on my house is around 2.4%. Now taking out a new mortgage, you're at about 6.5%. So the risk is that if interest rates go up outside, the value, if you ever need that $1,000 back early, it might actually go down. Or what we call credit risk as well. Credit risk is the idea that if something happened to the company, they might actually go under and may not be able to pay you that 6%. So there are some actual risks that are there. Now, the benefits of it is it's essentially an IOU. So they owe you 6% per year. You're not going to have a high risk, but you are going to have what we call consistent income. So if you're retired and you know that you're looking for a certain amount of income every single year, the income is going to be more consistent from fixed income like bonds. It's going to be lower risk. It's going to be more stable. You do have appreciation that's possible. So sometimes in between that, say, 30-year period that you have the bonds actually can go up and down depending on the interest rates and the credit, risks that are out there. So you can actually call it early, and your bond might be worth more than the $1,000 that you actually originally gave to them. So there is the possible for appreciation, but we tell people that's not really the goal of fixed income. The goal is having that consistent income. And then bankruptcy hierarchy. So the hierarchy of bankruptcy is saying that if the company did go under, you're actually a creditor to them now. And versus someone who actually owns stock in the company, you're one of the first people that actually gets paid back because you have that loan with them. So that's what we mean by fixed income investing. So when we talk about that $57,900, if you put $1,000 every single year into a fixed income investment that's paying you 6%, at the end of that time frame, you will have actually made a total of $27,900, plus you got your $30,000 back, so you have $57,900. So compared to that 1% investing in the bank, it almost seems like a no-brainer if you want to take on the different types of risks that are there. It's able to make you more money. Now, say you want higher rate of return than that. So with higher rates of return, there's going to be higher risk. That's where we're going to move into what's called stock investing. So stock investing is this idea that your buddy comes up to you again and says, listen, I want you to be a 50% owner in my company. So as my company continues to grow, say this car detailing business continues to grow in the future and he's making more money, he's getting more clients. Now he opens up, other locations, other people are working for him. As his business is valued and worth more, if you're a 50% owner in that business, now you're actually possibly making a lot more than what the fixed income investing is. So with stocks, it's this idea that with company A, so if we think about company A again, you're going to, they're going to have shares of stocks. And say each of those shares is worth a certain amount of money to start. We'll say $1,000. So if you buy 1, 2, 3, 4 shares of this stock, you are now a partial owner in that company. You have voting rights. Now, if you own 2 or 3 shares out of 1,000 shares, your vote might not be worth as much and you might not pay attention to it as much. But there's ways to kind of work around that. But the idea is that you are now a share owner, so as that company is valued, it can actually go up and you're making more money. So now people think, okay, well, this is a no-brainer. Why wouldn't I want to own the company and make more money? So there's pros and cons. Think of this as loaning. So you're loaning the money. This is owning. So you're owning the company. When you own it, you have a small fraction of the company. If you own a company like Apple that has tens of thousands of shares, you might have a very small piece of that company. But with higher risk, and we'll talk about the risk here in a second, there's a higher reward. So historically, when you take companies that have actually made it and succeeded, the potential for the higher income is actually much greater than the potential of the income of the fixed income side. Now, again, there are exceptions of companies that haven't done well, but for the majority of companies that are out there, the higher risk of owning their stock can actually present a higher reward. You might be looking at 9, 10, 11, 12 or greater percentage. What's great is that there's unlimited upside potential, but there's also the risk of the downside. So when you're owning stocks, you want to look at the long term and know that you're holding this for a long period of time because you want to continue making that money. And what's actually nice is that some stocks actually pay a dividend, which is very similar to what the fixed income does. Now, not all stocks pay that. That's typically companies that are going to be a little bit more consistent. They're not growing as much, but they're going to pay you a dividend. So your stock price can actually grow, but then you can also get the value of the dividend. Now, there's a lot of positives here. You always have to take into consideration any risks that are also there as well. So if we think about this, the unlimited upside potential also means that you could lose your entire investment. So if that company goes under, you could possibly lose your entire $1,000 or $50,000 or however much it was that you put into it. And on top of that, there's a lower creditor level. Meaning all of the people that actually loaned money to company A, they get paid first in a bankruptcy before you. So there's a potential that you don't get any money back whatsoever. So that high risk that we're talking about is because you could lose your entire investment. A lot of times this movement of the market is going to be like this. Think about like a lightning bolt that's going upwards. You're going to have sharp down areas, but you're going to have sharp upward areas. So you have to kind of balance that piece out there of what that actually looks like. And what we've actually seen recently, we're going to call it negative of owning stock, is what we call manipulation. The public has this ability to be able to what we call pump and dump, where they put a lot of money into buying stocks. It makes the stock look more attractive, and so the stock price goes up, and then all of a sudden people jump out of it once they've made a ton of money on it. So if you're not one of the people who understands what's actually happening to that stock, you might buy in when it's at the top of the market, and then when it drops, you could lose all of your money. So there's a lot of different risks that come with it, but this higher risk for someone who it's appropriate for may actually like that idea. We always want to see when someone's investing in the stock market, we want to see them invest in equities or stocks when it's a long-term investment. So think about retirement. Think about that house that you want to buy in 20 years. If it's a longer-term investment, you have the time frame. If you also have the tolerance for kind of seeing it bump up and down, we might want to see you actually invest in equities. Versus if it's a shorter time frame, or if you don't feel comfortable with that bumping up and down, you might be looking at some type of fixed income that tends to move a little bit more like stairs. So you're going to see that percentage of income coming in. So the $148,575, what we did was we said, if you take $1,000 every year for 30 years, put that $1,000 away, and you make 9% income on that annually, at the end, you would have $148,575. So the question for you is, what's that right risk tolerance? What's the goal of what you're doing? And that's where we like to sit down with you and actually go through a financial plan to help you figure out what the best investments are going to be. Because everyone's in a different position. Everyone has a different tolerance for risk and a different goal in mind. And we want to make sure that you're in the appropriate portfolio. So feel free to go ahead. We'd love to connect with you and talk to you a little bit more. And then just as an idea for our next video, we're going to take the idea of stocks and bonds and say, well, what if we don't want to just invest in one company? What if Tesla's not where I want to stick all my eggs? The idea of putting all of your eggs in one basket. So what we're going to do is we're going to look into what we call mutual funds and ETF investing. Thanks, guys, for coming in. Let me know if you have any questions. Let's find out what we can do together.